Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we're going to be talking about something pretty intense that is defying kind of general game logic and is setting what I believe to be almost a good-ish precedent here in the game, and we're going to talk about both sides of this. But what is actually happening in SSS1-8, which is the, I guess, third merge season here for SS1-2, but now again coincidentally being called this in the top left corner because they did do a shuffle of some of the kingdoms. And so just to show you this for which kingdoms are here and for what's happening, you can see we have 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8, right, are the ones here. Now, the challenge is that you have a situation where the kingdoms themselves are having kind of two interesting points that are really being made right now. The main one is that you have alliances in the kingdom that are not wanting to really fight. And so, you know, the powerhouse is really here, and we'll kind of show you what we're talking about and then just giving you a little bit more detail. So let's go back to Alliance Towers. So at the moment, you have TM, who's at almost 2 bill. You got TA, who's almost at 2 bill, right? And those are the two biggest alliances right now. Go almost there at 1.4, GRZ almost there at 1.3, GDB at a bill, other Goat almost 750. You have 900 mil, GZ1 900, almost 600, almost 530, almost 710. And then 282, right? So, but for all intents and purposes, you have TMTA, who are the biggest in the kingdom. Now, GRZ is also allied with them. So, you pretty much have TM, TA, and GRZ. And maybe TMN2, I don't really know kind of what the affiliation is, if they're a branch of TA or TM or the second one. So, I mean, I would assume so because they both went to Darlin in this case. So, you basically have these 4 out of 5 alliances. And again, this is just off Alliance Towers, but those alliances are kind of with each other. And again, I'm going to commit to TM, TA, and GRZ. I'm just assuming TM 1 or 2 is most likely with TM, and so by extension there. But at least with these 3. And then from what we're hearing in the kingdom, the idea is that it would be TA, TM, GRZ versus everyone else in the kingdom, right? So you're looking at Goat, who's at 1.34, GDB, who's at a mil, the other Goat Alliance, who's at 750, this other Goat Alliance at 900, not GRZ1, right, PTFO, and then MYRE, Data, right, so those. Now, if we look specifically at the leaderboards, and I already pulled some data here, and I'm going to show you this for what we pulled. So, here is showing you how the current numbers look when it comes to the top 200 players. So this is kind of, in short, factoring in GRZ. And sorry, this is mainly just TATM. When you look at the numbers kind of versus everyone, I can easily just throw GRZ in here for the top 200. We can kind of minus those out. But you can see here's kind of what the spread is. So TA and TM right here each have 51 and 52 players respectively out of those in the top 200. Goat has 14, along with their, I'm imagining, a secondary, so you're looking at 16. Then you have the remaining alliances, right? So it's basically these ones, and maybe I would assume maybe TM2, if that's safe enough to say, but at least these 3, and then everyone else. Now, here's what the numbers look like going top 10, 25, 50, 100, 150, and 200. Now, again, this is only factoring in TATM for now. These numbers are obviously more skewed if you add in GRZ and GRZ1, because then you're looking at 16 more alliances here, right? So the idea would be going 16, so you'd be looking, this would be 115, and then if we minus 16, what's that, 8377, right? So we'll kind of show how that looks. But if you just look, and again, well, I'll do this just to kind of show that GRZ1. But if you look at the top 10, you have 7 players on TATM and then 3 versus everyone else, right? However, it should be noted for full context that the 3 players, now bear in mind, these are actually GRZ, so funny enough, it actually would be, sorry, this is why we need to correctly, I'll say 9-1. But if you continue past the top 10, and we can, right? You have 2, 3. Let's keep going. So if you stop at the top 25, you have 3 players out of the top 25 that are on one side, and then the other 23 on the other side, right? Even though Immortal's the strongest in the kingdom, he is only one person, right? If you go beyond the top 25, here's 2, right? So you have 2 out of the top 30, 3 out of the top 34, 4 out of 37, 5 out of 42. So you have 5 players in the top 50 that are on one side, and the others are on the TA, TM, GRZ, potentially TM2 side. That, which I'm assuming, yes, because this says Monsters, this is the Monsters 2, so I guess it's safe to assume that. So you're at 5 out of 50. If we keep going, let's see, 6 out of 62. Maybe TT is not a part of them, so this could be 7 out of 63. 869. 869, 973, 1074, 1176, and we'll just go to 100. 1286, 1391, 1492, 1596, 15, 16, 17. So you got 17 out of the top 100. So you got 17 on one side, and again, this is only under the hypothetical that they're all together. And then you have 83 on the other side. So when you look at it like this, the numbers themselves are very imbalanced. And if you're looking at everything objectively, it's very easy to look at this and make the argument, well, what's the point of fighting if there's that much disparity, right? Especially if you're the side that does not have a lot of the top players, right? Now, there will be some who will make that argument, well, activity can, beat power at times. And bear in mind that this can be true to an extent, which means that, let's say you're in a home kingdom and you have thousands of players, couple 10,000 people that are still active, and you're able to really band together hundreds of people, right? And then go in and fight against a few, spenders, right, or heavy or high spenders. Yeah, there is a chance that you can apply a level of pressure, and you might be able, if you're very coordinated, you can definitely have a high percentage chance of performing well in that matchup and potentially winning. However, the difference is that when you're in a merge kingdom, quite a bit of that activity is consistently dwindling. And that is predominantly because of a few factors. One, usually there's always going to be player drop-off, on whether it's a daily basis or a seasonal basis, and that's just always going to plague. Right? It's like taking a full water bottle, poking a tiny hole at the bottom, and that's what it is. And migration and recruitment basically is you unscrewing the lid at the top and pouring some more water in. And that's kind of what the idea is about how player drop-off is constantly being affected. So in these situations, the understanding is that because you have a limited pool of players, it's like you're merging, right? You're allowing for players to recruit from other kingdoms that you're going in and doing these merge seasons with, right? Or kind of towards the end of the season, like we saw, there was a pool of, those alliances that were in SS1-2 and SS1-3 who could move and migrate to and from where they wanted within those 5 kingdoms, or 6 kingdoms and then 4 for the other. And so the challenge there is it's kind of almost like recycling the same water that everyone's using, right? Because you have this small pool of kingdoms and you're only allowed to recruit within that. Now, sure, you can make the argument that as seasons go up and they go into the new season and they get new kingdom matchups, right? They'll kind of be able to pick up more players along the way. Yeah, sure, that's always a possibility. But I think for me, one of the things that I've always loved about having free migration, and I'm only going to touch on this briefly, is that it allows for players to freely move and go where they may, even if you still do pure merge. Now, the challenge here is that, now, yes, I am all for kind of you can migrate anywhere you want, but there just needs to be, but you can't do it until you have come up to the end of a season, and the people that are in those kingdoms have to be able to control what the power cap is. And I'm talking setting it at whatever you want, right? You want to set the power cap at 1? You want to set it at 1,013 power? You want to set it at 10,956,342? Do it. That level of customizing the power cap and having someone who can control that, and then you can accept or deny people that are applying, really needs to be the future. However, when we look at one of the bigger challenges is that these kingdoms aren't being purely merged, right? So you have to look at it like it's like you're doing this fake merge, but everyone is still within their home kingdoms. Yet you do not have some type of free migration throughout the game that's allowing not only for a level of autonomy, but also to be able to go wherever you want. And so that's the thing, is by making it easier, whether you do it in that way or you go forward with a pure merge where you would take kingdoms like 1 through 4 as an example, and you're just like, bam, merge them together. This is your new home kingdom. They have to kind of commit on one side or the other, because otherwise you're going to potentially get into situations like what we're seeing now in SSS1-8, which again leads me to kind of how awesome this is to see. It really shows you what you can do when you have a united front. So what we're hearing here in SSS1-8 is that a number of alliances specifically do not want to fight because of the power disparity. So they're thinking, well, we'll just go ahead and join up with TA, TM, GRZ, maybe TM2, etc., and we're just going to assimilate ourselves in there, right? So it was told to me by a source that alliances like GOAT, alliances that were from Gas at one point, and then some of the players from S8 and S9, I believe, within this group have essentially just kind of come together and said, look, we're not going to fight. We're just going to go and join because of the fact that there's such a huge power disparity. And it's not as though they have thousands of players that are active in the kingdom altogether. So, and I'm going to talk about both sides here. It's interesting when we look at it from one side of you have a group of players that has come together and said, look, we're just not going to fight, essentially kind of taking the oxygen out of the room. So now if TATM, GRZ, TM2 decide we're going to go and fight, well, they're not going to fight anyone. They're just going to go and hit farmers. And, it's kind of hard to really justify that without coming across as bullies or just making more people quit at that point, right? So because you have to think about it, if they're not going to fight, then the only thing they really have left to look forward to is farming. And if you take that away from them, sure, it might be fun for you in the short term or in the interim, but long time down the road, these players still want to develop their accounts. And it doesn't mean that they never will fight again. It just means that they're not looking forward, or they don't see any value in fighting right now. So then you have to think about when with where you're at currently is, okay, well, what do we do? Do we attempt to balance the power? Because that's really what they're saying they were hoping and or looking for, is let's balance the power and then have fair fights for a long period of time. Because remember, everyone wants to fight, but the challenge is that most of the time when, and again, we're in a merged kingdom, so the idea of fighting is a little bit more predominant here than it is in your home kingdom or your starting kingdom for Season 1. But the challenge is that when you're looking to fight with the number of people here, and you're not able to create an environment that is welcoming for the players that do want to fight, it's a turnoff. And so by doing things like balancing, power balancing between alliances, you have to understand that it's a psychological thing. You need to, players have to be able to visually see that, oh, all of the alliances are all within 100 mil of each other, and we have ones at 200, at 2 mil, 2.1, 2.2, 1.9, 2.05, etc. And you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, all of these alliances are pretty close. This is now more doable when it comes to us fighting against each other, right? Now, sure, you might have to still consider what the top power distribution is, right? You might have to do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you kind of split people up that way. This is something, because you have to look at it. You're either going to have no PvP, right? You have to look at it on one hand, you're going to have no PvP or hardly any, and it's going to be Farmville pretty much, or you're going to balance power, and you're going to have a super fun, fantastic time doing organized PvP, war games, or just fighting all the time, or fighting a lot more than you would be if you didn't do that on this side. And the challenge is looking past that as the need versus the want. And the challenge there is that the want, in most cases, is that you look at a group like TA and TM, which is, look, they're one of their strategies, and this isn't, I'm not saying it's bad or good, I'm just saying one of their strategies has been, like, let's funnel everyone into one alliance and just be stronger than everyone else, and let's use that then as a form of a recruiting tactic when at the end of SS1-2, where they were able to get more players that came over so they could fill more into TM and, maybe make a third alliance at that point, and we're just going to do that. That's all well and good, and it's all well and dandy. But the challenge there still remains, and I know I'm using this word a lot, but it really is that you can bring over the strongest players and the best players, and you can end up having the super server. But if you are not going to get matched up against other kingdoms that are at a similar point, then you have to set some realistic expectations within your own kingdom and with the merged kingdom itself, which is that you would have to explain to your players, look, we're not going to fight this season, but in the next season or the second season, we will be ready to fight against, maybe the 30s, right? The 30s to the 40s, where we know that there's going to be a lot of strong kingdoms coming out of there. And then that's potentially the matchups that you look to sell. But that's going to be a while, right? And so in me saying all of this, it's awesome to see that you have a group of alliances and players that are saying, like, look, we're just not going to fight, we're just going to join you, kind of almost go neutral or just, as we said, assimilate, and they just kind of suck the oxygen out of the room. It's funny because this was something that I preached about and advised my leadership team within 65, specifically for the ones initially, before mentioning it to everyone, that were looking to fight against DS, where I basically said, look, the best option here is not to fight. The best option is to not fight and create a level of boredom for those players in that alliance and allow for that to seep and kind of sow what it needs to, let that marinate a bit, and watch how that can change the narrative and change the approach of the alliance and of said players, because no one's going to fight. So all they're going to do is potentially go around hitting farmers, and no one's ever going to fight back. That's not fun. It is boring to some people. But that's the point, is that sometimes choosing not to fight and creating an environment where you have sucked the oxygen and you've let the wind leave the sails is a phenomenal tactic that I've seen work, and you're kind of seeing it work here. And again, I don't think that they're doing this in some type of a way, like a negative way or anything like that. It's just they're looking at the numbers, just like I showed you, and it's hard to quantify and or even just justify having the other alliances and those players fighting against the strongest that are in the kingdom. This is one of the downsides of when you are not willing to power balance and you're only looking to create super or mega alliances within your kingdom. These are challenges that you can run into. Now, as I said, this may not necessarily be the case when you get matched up against stronger kingdoms, right? However, the reason, and I want to say this, I do believe part of what we're seeing right now is an appropriate reaction, a rational reaction, a logical reaction from one side due to the fact that we only have a limited number or a small pool of merged kingdoms, right? Because we still have to wait for more time to go by for all these other kingdoms to get caught up, right? So you're going to have this kind of window, this delay from the early beta kingdoms that are going through their merge seasons like we're seeing now, until enough kingdoms can then get into their first merge kingdom, and then they'll be able to kind of start getting matched up here and there. But even if you think about that, you're going to have to wait, arguably. I mean, if you're talking right now, you might have to wait 100 days, 110, 120 days for the kingdoms to finish up their first seasons. Then they have to go through their first merged kingdom. Before they kind of get to Season 3, if you want to call it that, let's just make it easy, right? Season 1's your home kingdom, Season 2 is your first merged kingdom, and then Season 3 would be where you'd potentially see a merged kingdom matchup, some type of matchmaking or ELO system that's being applied in some way, shape, or form that would then be the devs, again, pairing appropriate kingdoms. But that's going to be a while if you're talking from right now on what SSS1-8, and more specifically the players that are in TA, TM, GRZ, TM2, that would be looking for. And I'm not saying maybe all of them in the Alliance are looking for that, but I think the idea is that you want to fight. I look at the game, when I look at CoD, I think to myself, home kingdom is for developing and doing what I feel is just a level of organized PvP and war games so you can prepare and get players ready for the merge kingdom, but also giving them the opportunity to freely grow and develop their accounts where they're not impeded from lawless PvP, right, or rogue activity. And then you get into the merge kingdom and you guys fight to your heart's content, and but hopefully you have some semblance of civility when it comes to it not just being like a complete war zone, so to speak, especially if you have one side that's not doing anything, right? Because that can kind of hamper the willingness for them to go back and fight again. And obviously there's factors that go into that. So I think all in all, what we're seeing happening here in this kingdom, as I mentioned, is just a logical, rational, and appropriate response based on the power disparity. And you can't fault them for doing that. I mean, to be fair, when I look at the numbers, would I advise them fighting if I was coming in and looking at the situation and assessing it appropriately or objectively? I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend them fighting. I would probably recommend them either doing, I don't know if I would recommend them assimilating and joining these other alliances, but I would just recommend them either condensing between some of their alliances and then just focusing on developing and fighting, and then maybe doing some small skirmishes here and there if they want to do some form of organized PvP. But as far as doing something where it's like, hey, we all get to Zone 3, and then we just fight it out when the gates open, or we build to the dragon and we fight it out, or we'll fight it out in Zone 2, right, when the pass is open. I wouldn't advise it. I just don't think that it would be the best move given what the disparity is. Now, maybe if you're fighting it one-on-one, that could be a little bit different, but the disparity is still there because as you saw with the numbers, alliances like TA and TM just have an overwhelmingly more amount, right, anywhere from 4 to maybe 10 times the amount of top 200 players that the other alliances do. And they arguably have the most amount of T5 players as well. So that in and of itself just kind of further becomes challenges. And these are, again, every action has a reaction. Every decision has its own form of pros and cons or repercussions or consequences that can happen. And when you run kind of mega alliance structures, this is one of those downsides that can happen. But also consider this. When you eventually get, like, let's say, for example, you look at the top stats board, and let me see if I can pull this up real quick just so I can show you guys what I'm talking about. So let's say we look at the previous top stats. Again, this data was gathered on the 11th of May, so it's been, 2 weeks? A little over 2 weeks at this point. But let's just say we go off this. And let's say that we were to take the alliances, because remember, the challenge is we don't know what the home kingdom's true power is right now because they're just doing merged kingdoms all day long, right? At least thus far. This is one of the reasons I suggested in a previous video on kingdoms should need to go back to their home kingdom. Like, there's two ways of looking at this. One way is kingdoms go back to their home kingdom for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a short period of time, just so they can recalibrate, they can reassess, they can reorganize and restructure their alliances, and they can kind of see what their current activity and current power is, right, from all their players. because there's no way to really gauge that right now when you're constantly going from merge kingdom to merge kingdom. The only thing you really have is just, your core leadership team that you can kind of take with you from merge kingdom to merge kingdom. But you don't really have the most accurate way to use the in-game system as kind of a head count in some degrees, right? Because you can't really look at like the entire leaderboards and kind of pull data and do summaries and run some types of stat collections. It's a little more difficult. You'd have to basically have a Discord. You'd have to keep track of everyone that's currently in your home kingdom, and then anyone who migrates or joins, you'd have to keep track that way. Like that's kind of the way that you would do it for the most part. Because remember, anyone that is in when you're going into SSS1-8, right? Even if you're all a part of S2, you still all have to join the same. Like if you want to play with everyone, you still would have to join the same Zone 1 province. But you could technically go and join a different Zone 1 province, and you may not know if those players are a part of Kingdom 2 or not, right? Because you can't click on their name and see what kingdom they're from, right? If you're someone who's from that kingdom, or if you are that player, you can click on your profile and you can see where your home kingdom is. But anyways, without diving too far, my point in saying all of this is, let's say that S2 was up here still, right, close to S32, and you were to have S2, S32, S33, S31, S34. Like those would be the kingdoms that get put into a merge kingdom, right? Like that's kind of how you would look at it if you're looking at rankings for the top kingdoms. I'm just saying that's one way to do it, where you would look at, if you're going to pair at 5s, then you would do the top 5, you would do 6 through 10, 11 through 15, 16 through 20, etc. And you would do something like that. So anyways, again, I feel like I'm kind of rambling at this point. There's just a lot to really talk about because, like I said, I think this is a very interesting and almost good precedent to set, which is to say, like, look, if you guys are just expecting us to fight this disproportionate battle where the power disparity is just obscenely obvious. And again, I'm not saying that that's a negative or a bad thing towards the alliances that have the power. We're just talking about looking at it at face value for what we're seeing. And when you make certain decisions, what those would be. Now, to me, it's pretty simple. If you want to fight, you power balance, and then everyone gets to enjoy fighting. The challenge, and this is really the last thing I'll leave you with, right, as my kind of little fun pro tip, is that you can really tell the alliances and the players who enjoy punching down and don't necessarily view the challenge of punching up, or even just punching more appropriately straight on, where it doesn't have to be up or down, and those that don't. And that's really kind of the end way of looking at it. And sure, you'll have sides that will say, well, why do we have to be the ones to power balance when we were the ones who did the recruiting and these players came here and we kept our retention, etc.? Well, sure, that is one way to look at it. But if you decide to do that, then don't be mad when, and I'm not saying that anyone is mad. I'm just saying, generally speaking, right? You cannot really be mad, or you can't really have any kind of negative feelings towards others that don't want to fight because of that. And so, it almost begs the question on, should the developers come up with some type of power balancing type cap or restrictions on alliances, so that way more alliances and more players will be more incentivized to actually fight? Because if you're looking at SSS1-8 right now, and let's just say that no fighting happens, this cannot be a good look in the developers' eyes, where they want to have a lot of fighting, because the more fighting and the more war and the more PvP that happens, the more money they make. Which again is just kind of standard, right? From what we know of with how things like KVKs work. And so, I think to me, when I look at it like this, I almost feel like the better play would have been for them to do a straight up full merge, right? Just kind of going along, which is what most of us initially thought was going to happen, is look, take kingdoms like when S1 through S4 merged into SS1-2, why not just make that the new kingdom, right? Now that kingdom will be called S1. And then you'll take 6 through 8 or 5 through 8, and then now they'll be S2, right, as an example. And you do that, you merge the kingdoms so you can improve activity, and then from there, you then go into your merge kingdoms, right? You then go into like your KVK, temp variants, whatever it may be. So again, I'm hitting you guys with a lot. This is, to me, I'm so passionate. I really love talking about these things when it comes to kind of endgame theories, when it comes to, kingdom management, when it comes to what's actually happening in these merged kingdoms with alliances that have all the power and ones that don't, and what's the view on balancing, and how is that affecting the PvP, and how is that affecting the game dynamics, and how is that affecting the bottom dollar and bottom line. Like, it's fascinating to me. And trust me when I say there's reasons why this is happening. And I hope, if anything, even though I'm basically at 30 minutes right now, I hope those of you that have made it to this far appreciate the analysis. I hope you appreciate and or at least can understand me highlighting these trends and why they're happening and what the implications are of them, because this is like a very serious thing when it comes to the longevity and the sustainability of kingdoms, merged kingdoms, and the game itself. And like I said, I love Call of Dragons. I think the game has so much potential. And this is probably just, again, you can view this as a temporary road bump that probably isn't going to happen once we end up having more kingdoms that end up coming into their merged kingdoms, and we get those kingdoms to kind of where these ones are at and more of that Season 3 plus. And then you'll be able to not really see this. Maybe you'll never see this type of situation again. Or maybe these are things that will be more obvious, where you'll have alliances that will unify in a way where they don't want to fight unfair or imbalanced battles. And because they have people that can come together, they can take the wind out of others' sails and say, look, we want fair and balanced PvP, and we'll fight all day long. And again, I'll leave you guys with my viewpoint on this when I go into a merged kingdom is, sure, do I want my home kingdom to be as strong as possible? Of course. But I also recognize the value of fighting battles or being able to have long, sustained, and just amazingly fun wars from doing power balancing and what that brings. And this is something that I have called out very early on during the beta. And for those of you that followed the project in 65, and what we were trying to do there was very prevalent in understanding the long-term impact of what the value and the true value is of doing things like power balancing. And so, again, this is not to say that it's always going to be perfect, especially when you're just kind of referring to your home kingdom. It's obviously a lot easier once you get into merged kingdoms and you kind of are able to have everyone more consolidated power and then the activity, and then once you get into future zones. But anyways, I digress. I don't want to go off on another tangent. I'm going to leave you with all that. And now I'm going to pass the question on to you all. What do you think about what's happening here in SSS1-8? What do you think about my thoughts surrounding the what we're seeing with the big power, the little power, value of power balancing? Do you think this is something that the devs are going to look at and assess and try to maybe approach it differently? What do you think about kingdoms going into their first merged kingdom with doing an actual pure merge, and then they go into some type of a KVK related format? What do you think about them saying, let's go back to the home kingdom, let's open up migration, and then allow for more movement, and then they can just merge the kingdoms that have low activity because they have to be able to see that data and those stats, and then that way you're still consolidating, but you're kind of merging them at a threshold. So, you might take 4 low active kingdoms, and then now all of a sudden they're an average active kingdom, right? But they're not kind of running away. It's not like they're forcing kingdoms become super servers in a sense. So again, I think there's quite a few different directions they can take when it comes to solutions. And I'm going to leave you with that, man. My passion bubble is exploding. And so that's going to do it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. As always, until next time, I will catch you later.